I didn't really know what to expect from the Backrooms movie. I would say on the whole, I like this movie. It does more things that I like than I don't, and I'll start off by giving my general thoughts and get into some spoiler stuff at the end. I was quite concerned that this piece of internet culture, internet lore, a creepypasta story that has a following mainly in the niche of internet horror fans, would struggle to be translated by a Hollywood studio into a successful mainstream horror movie. With the two Five Nights at Freddy's movies and even stuff like Until Dawn, more niche horror from video games and from the internet is starting to be tapped into to give the horror movie industry some fresh blood. The way I see Backrooms is part of a larger canvas of media that is being adapted into horror films, like The Last of Us or the upcoming Resident Evil movie, even though Resident Evil movies have already existed. The question was, would Backrooms be able to retain the thing that makes it so interesting in internet horror when translated to the screen? The fundamental component behind this aspect of the movie being successful is its director, Kane Parsons, who breathed new life into the Backrooms with his short horror film that went viral about 2 or 3 years ago. Based on that short horror film that he made, I had high hopes for the found footage segments of this movie, and this movie does not disappoint. Those are definitely the standout moments of this film. I actually cannot think of found footage segments in horror that are as effective as we see in Backrooms. The way that the field of view, the point of view moves, the sound design, how loud the ruffling, the moving, the footsteps are. It's one of the best approaches to found footage that I've ever seen. I feel like the Backrooms found footage is the modern day equivalent for the Blair Witch found footage in terms of how iconic it is going to be. I think for a new generation, found footage will be a style that is forever associated with the Backrooms, or with this style of horror based on video games and traversing unfamiliar territory. I have quite mixed feelings on the movie overall, even though the found footage parts are really great and definitely the reason to go and experience the movie in the cinema. I think another reason this movie is ultimately a success is the way that the movie captures the mystery of the Backrooms as a liminal space. The way that the Backrooms sets are designed really makes you think, how far does it go on for? What else might be in here? Why does it exist? Is it natural? Is it another dimension? Is it man-made? All of those questions come through here, and I do think that what this movie will do is it will introduce the idea of the Backrooms to a broader audience, but I don't think this movie is the greatest exploration of stories you can tell using the Backrooms. A couple of years ago, when Kane Parsons released that short film, the reason this film got made was because people saw that and went, wow, there's a lot of potential in a Backrooms feature-length movie. Think of all the stories you can tell, especially with an extended runtime. And I think that people will watch this movie and come away with the exact same conclusion, that there's a lot of potential with this idea and you can do a lot more than what we ended up doing in this film. The mystery about the Backrooms is weaved into the narrative, but this movie doesn't feel like an iconic standalone film. It feels like something which is setting up future, more interesting Backroom stories, which is not something that I would like. I'd like this film to be able to become an instant classic. I don't know if I really want a Backrooms 2. At the very least, I think this movie proves the concept, but I don't think this is the best it can be. It did feel like there was a lot of missed potential still, which is obviously being balanced by the fact that they are introducing this new idea to people who are not going to have a single clue about what the Backrooms are. Another thing that sets this movie apart slightly is how different it feels directorially. Visually, this movie does feel more like a short film in the way it's directed than a feature film or a Hollywood studio film that could be directed by any hired hand. I think it worked to the movie's benefit sometimes because it does make it feel different and like you're watching something that is trying something new and that is novel, but sometimes I felt like it may have bordered on amateurish or a product of a budgetary constraint. So it was a double-edged sword in the end. I really like how the Backrooms look in this movie. They look exactly like they do in the short film, and there are some sections of this movie where we're not doing found footage, we're instead using what we might call clean cameras. And I think the Backrooms still looked very good and very eerie in the way the abstract dimensions are captured, even though we are losing the graininess of the found footage, which really is an essential part of the liminal space horror that Backrooms. Kane Parsons clearly knows what he's doing in capturing the visual language of the Backrooms, and it would be hard to imagine another director, or maybe like a more experienced director, being able to do the idea of the Backrooms justice, because I have that innate skepticism about studios being able to understand the core fundamental components of what makes niche video game horror or internet horror actually work, because we've seen it fail so many times. But someone like Kane Parsons can really do it justice, and that's also why I feel like the upcoming Zach Cregger Resident Evil might have an edge, especially over the previous Resident Evil movies, because I get the sense that it's being made by someone who understands why this thing worked in the first place. I think Chiwetel Ejiofor is a really great choice for the lead role in this movie. His acting is really great, and he's definitely the standout. So overall, I liked this movie. You should go see it for him. You should see it for this new up-and-coming director, Kane Parsons, because he's going to go on to do some really interesting things. You should see it for the found footage. Those sections are the best parts of the film. And if you like the Backrooms, if you like liminal space horror, then there is plenty in this movie that you can like. But now I'm going to get into some spoiler territory, so you've been warned. I think the storyline of this movie sometimes worked to weaken the film overall. The way the Backrooms are presented was very heavily reminiscent of Stranger Things. I think this movie ran the risk of presenting the Backrooms as simply an alternate reality. Every single room is able to be mapped directly to a Backrooms room, much like the Upside Down. And we have these government scientists who are in there doing experiments, trying to work out what it is. And whilst we never really delved that deep into what the scientists knew of the Backrooms, which I think was a good decision, it did feel very Stranger Things. And the problem that Stranger Things fundamentally had with the Upside Down was it never really made its mind up on exactly what the Upside Down was, whether or not it was just the people who were causing problems in there, whether or not it was just a directly mappable one-to-one alternate reality, or whether it was this infinite space that happened to be similar. And because this movie doesn't really wrap up in a way that is very satisfying, in my opinion, at least in terms of the scope of stories being able to be told in the Backrooms, that leaves the door open to future explanation about what the Backrooms are. And actually, I don't think you need more explanation than what you have in this film. I do have a concern that any future Backrooms movies will attempt to try and introduce a single villain or a hive mind maybe that controls whatever is in the Backrooms, and I don't think that's needed. If we were to provide explanation in this movie, it would have been quite nice, at least for my own personal taste, to have an explanation along the lines of, we don't understand what's going on, we'll never understand what's going on, and it's seemingly random. I don't want us to be able to introduce rules to this that we have to follow. I like the randomness and unpredictability of the Backrooms, and so I did like the twist that the weird shape, the dark creature in the Backrooms, is actually a form of our lead character, the alter ego of Clark. It was implied that the scientist invented this creature to hunt him down, which I don't know if I'm really a fan of, but all of the stuff to do with the Backrooms being a memory of what used to exist, and therefore the things being left inside also become memories of themselves, poor copies. I thought that was a really good explanation for how the place could work. And that does open the door to a lot more interesting possibilities for future Backroom stories. I do feel like the missed potential largely comes from when we had the three people inside of the Backrooms. They go exploring and then they encounter the big monster and then they very quickly just get picked off. When actually it would be more interesting if the Backrooms readjusted itself in real time. Someone turns a corner and then as the next person is going to turn a corner, there's like a wall in front of them. I think that kind of stuff would be a lot more interesting to do. It doesn't really work in the way that they presented the Backrooms, because they presented it like it's a fixed space. You can go there, it never changes. When actually I think that's a constraint we've placed on ourselves that we didn't really need. Why not have the place be completely different every time? Or at least maybe our characters think they know the way around, but then it's changed when they need to know. I thought we were going to do that with the entrances being different each time, so maybe we go in and then when we need to go back, the entrance is gone. It seems like the locations within the backrooms are very fixed, and whilst obviously not a problem, it might prove to be a constraint in any future stories. I also like the idea of the backrooms not being a reality. I would like the idea that if you're in the backrooms, you might see things that are not real, that only maybe you can see. A more supernatural approach in that way would be very interesting. Maybe when Mary goes in, she can see Clark, but Clark can't see her because whatever the backrooms is showing them is different for each person. And you don't need to have a single entity controlling that. That can just be because this place is not real and you can't orient yourself in it. Humans are just not meant to be in this place. So I think there were missed opportunities there when splitting our trio up. Maybe giving each of them a camera and swapping between the different perspectives would have been good. I did think Clark was going to find some found footage and then review it and then find something out, but that never happened. I thought he might find the footage from the cold open, but I guess that wouldn't make sense because it's being monitored by the science team, and so any recordings in there would just be picked up by them. And I also thought that the storyline between Clark and Mary was often weak and superficial at times. That is not the reason to go see this movie, to be interested in the plotline. And whilst it was interesting to have a main character that felt very at home in the backrooms for whatever reason, I don't think the psychoanalysis of that person is the most interesting thing about a backrooms movie. Instead, it would be the mechanics of the backrooms. And there are lots of ways you can get an audience interested in a character's journey and exploration of the backrooms and why they may want to keep going in there. I don't think the fact that Clark's wife left him and therefore he feels very happy in the backrooms, or he's not a very nice guy and he's very uncaring about his workers and his wife, I don't think any of these traits about him that make him really want to stay in the backrooms are interesting at all, because you just sort of come away from the movie being like, well, I guess he was always a crazy person, or I guess this is where people who aren't afforded opportunities in societies want to end up. I'm really struggling to draw a proper conclusion about this from that plot line, and so I'm left thinking that it could have been done a lot better, and it's definitely the weakest part of this movie. It did lead to some interesting moments. I just think overall we could have picked something different, and that would have made this movie a bit more iconic as a standalone film, rather than leaving me wanting more and thinking this is just a good setup for a future Backrooms movie to be truly iconic. So those are my thoughts on Backrooms. I complained about some stuff at the end there, but actually overall I had a very good time. Some parts of it did drag in my opinion, but I thought the horror elements of this were really well executed, and it's a very impressive debut movie for Kane Parsons, and I'm very interested to see what he does in the future. So in my book, that is a 4 stars out of 5. 4 stars!